Hello and welcome back. It is Gifted, Talented, and Neurodiversity Awareness Week. And today we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, which is super exciting because this was something that came up in our original kind of brainstorming about this week. And I tried a few different things and I just hadn't it hadn't come together. And I'm like, no, I really kind of want this on the list. And only, I think, very recently, I was catching up with Sam Young from Young Scholars Academy and they do D&D, and I was like, "Oh, any chance it's short notice, but any chance, we could catch up and you could share with us why you do D&D and what's so great about it." And so Sam very graciously fit me in and we caught up this week. Like, I don't usually record podcasts quite that late. I do try and, get things a bit early in that. So it was really exciting to get it all finished in time for today's release. And it wasn't all smooth sailing. It was Thursday for him, it was Wednesday for me, except initially I was like, I got up on the Tuesday, and this is just how podcasting goes sometimes. So I'm delighted that we got through all of that, and I can bring you today a conversation about Dungeons and Dragons and why it's so cool and why it offers so many things to gifted kids and gifted grown-ups. And if you haven't considered D&D before, maybe after this episode you will have another look at it, because there's so much creativity and problem solving, and it's the diversity. D&D is just all about diversity. So it's just this lovely inclusive community. And if you listen to this as like a hardcore D&D player, I am sorry. And if you're thinking, we're just not going into enough detail, I am happy to do a part 2 D&D with a hardcore D&D player, and we can kind of do that justice, because I know there is a lot of complexity in it. So, like, get in touch. I'm putting the offer out there. If you want to do a part 2 D&D episode with me, I would be delighted to do that. But this is awesome for beginners and awesome for parents if they're kind of like, what is this D&D thing all about? And I realized had picked up quite a lot about D&D on this journey. And so it was lovely to talk about all that stuff with Sam today. And of course, a lot of the content from Gifted, Talented, and Neurodiversity Awareness Week this week will still be available, because even last year's webinars and stuff are still available on the website at the G Word. And we are proud partners of the G Word, love their work, super excited about what they're producing. And so you can check out their website, register, sign up, access last year's stuff, and continue to access this year's stuff, because the caliber is very impressive. Like, it's the bee's knees. Also, here at Our Gifted Kids, as you know, we've had a whole week of podcasts. We've currently got our 3 membership community options open. For as little as a coffee a month, you too can support the podcast, help keep us going, and bringing more awesome podcasts to you about parenting gifted kids. You can find out more information in the show notes or at ourgiftedkids.com/hub. And I will see you again next week, because I have a little bonus episode. So altogether it will be 7 episodes for this year's GTN Awareness Week. So stay tuned for that, but stay quirky, enjoy the D&D episode, and I will talk to you again very soon. Hi, I'm Sophia Elliott. As a parent of 3 gifted kids, I'm here to talk about all things gifted, because I've been isolated and uncertain, and I felt like that parent. Then I found peace of mind, support, and my community. This podcast is about sharing that journey, actually parenting gifted kids, and connecting with advice and support. So we have everything we need for every member of our family to thrive. This is the Our Gifted Kid podcast. Okay, so folks, it's Friday of Gifted, Talented, Neurodiversity Awareness Week, and what a huge week it has been. And I'm super excited here today. We're following our joy, our gifted joy. And when I thought about all the things that gifted folk I know love to do, and what brings them joy, I had to include Dungeons and Dragons on that list. And so I'm really excited today to be inviting Mr. Sam from the Young Scholars Academy to have a little chat with us about why they include it as a part of what they do. But first of all, Mr. Sam, welcome.
Thank you.
And tell us a little bit about yourself as one of our new guests on the podcast. So I'm excited that you're here.
Sophia, thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I so a little bit about me, I'll be really quick, not as exciting as Dungeons and Dragons. So uh, I am a neurodivergent educator myself, and I am the founder of a program called Young Scholars Academy, which is a virtual enrichment program for gifted, neurodivergent, and twice exceptional students the world over. So the idea is just that we have strength-based, talent-focused, interesting enrichment courses so that students can come together and just have, even but an hour a week to be steeped in their interests and strength areas.
That sounds awesome. And because as finding your people, your peers as a gifted kid, let alone our very awesome, quirky gifted kids, can be really hard. So it's great that you're creating this environment where we can gather them together. And we're going to get Sam back on a future podcast, and maybe I'm not sure, maybe we'll talk about ADHD because it's something we have in common. And I'll quickly share this story. So I was recently diagnosed with ADHD, and something I do struggle with is time blindness. So I will admit this is the second time I'm up in the morning to talk to Sam because I got the days wrong. And I am a shocker with time zones. And so we're here. So I'm here. And I have to admit, it's not the first time I've done that. Back when I first started the podcast, I had to get up for like 1 a.m. to do this interview, which I'm happily a night owl. So that was cool. Except I got the day wrong then as well. So I had to do it 2 days in a row. So I'm like, oh my God, I got to get better at this.
It's not easy. It's not easy stuff. And then once you do figure it out, there's all these curveballs like time zones changing in some countries and not changing in
Yeah.
others. Daylight savings. I mean, it's just so confusing.
Yeah, it is. And because Adelaide is one of those places, it shifts around with daylight savings. And I'll be honest, I can never keep track. So I use Calendly to try and solve those problems for myself. But every now and then one gets through. So that, and we had to laugh because normally it's my husband that kind of does things like that. So it was quite funny when he got home. He's like, I'm ready to manage the kids while you do the thing, because he'd been at the gym. And I was kind of like, oh, I got the day wrong. And he just laughed at me because it's kind of like, haha, you did it. It's usually me kind of thing.
That's too funny. I know the struggle
Yeah,
all too well.
yeah, exactly right. So anyways, we're here today to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. And I was just, when I saw it was something that you guys do, I was just kind of like, let's have a chat about why it's sort of one of those things that you've found worthy of kind of offering. So tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, it's one of those things where once you name something, it has great power, and with great power sometimes there's a lot of loaded projection and so forth, right? So when we think of what we want a lot of our students to do, it's to have a space like you're talking about. I say it's the X and Y axis, right? The X is like we want our students to have this space where they can be with neurodivergent peers. They can look over and say, oh, they're just
Mhm,
like me. Like they like the
mhm,
same silly memes and the same jokes, and we have the same like really radically asynchronous sense of humor. And then the why being that they can look up at like a mentor who's
mm,
someone who's also neurodivergent and like gets their little jokes and is maybe a
mm,
generation or two older than them. And I think that's like a really powerful formula for success for our students, because they often don't get it, right? They're often in an environment where they might be like totally marooned or outcasted, or with people who only see their deficits. So we know that we want, what do a lot of parents want? Well, they say they want socializing classes. They say they want their students to have these things, but our students don't really often want that. So when we think of like really creative environments, if we get rid of the label, we get rid of the name, we say, what do we want students to do? We want them thinking critically, we want them socializing, we want them, being creative, we want them connecting with peers, we want them having fun and loving. And we just happen to call that Dungeons and Dragons. But it's all of those things. If you put a kid in a socializing class, you say, like, I want you to get better at taking cues and working as a team,
Mhm.
it just feels like so deficit based. It's like, you
Yeah.
suck, you're not doing this well,
Yeah.
or maybe fix it. It's like, oh.
Yeah.
But if you're
Yeah.
like, hey, do you want to go on like a mythical quest and fight these skeletons and figure out how we can get into the castle? Yeah, heck yeah, like sign me up. So
Yeah.
I found that, and again, I'm not a Dungeons and Dragons. I grew up playing Magic the Gathering, but I not Dungeons and Dragons. But I've just found that there's something so magical about it that allows our students to do all the things that we want to do, have a boatload of fun while they're doing it, and come out the other end, you know, far better off with new friends and connections and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're bang on there about it, just ticking all of those boxes. It was a couple of years ago that our family kind of went on the Dungeons and Dragons quest. We introduced it as parents because we were looking for a way to kind of segue our very factual, fact-oriented child into something a little bit more creative, just to bring out that creativity. And oh my, did it tick some boxes? Because first of all, for anyone who is new to Dungeons and Dragons, there is a rule book that is like 2 centimeters thick. Like
Yeah,
this is a stodgy, and it comes as a hard copy. Like this is
yeah.
this is serious rules, right?
Right, right.
And
Glossy
so
cover. Yeah.
yeah, and so immediately any of our gifted kids who are into rules, like it's like this massive, it's complex, and it just kind of lit our child up. That's kind of like, oh my goodness, already it's amazing, like just the rule book.
Mhm,
And then we so we do two things, and we haven't done this for a little while, and I'm kind of feeling like inspired that we should do it again at some point soon. And we'd play kind of stripped down version at home because we had younger kids as well. And our child would go to the local library and play with a group there. And not quite old enough to kind of be there by theirself, but so I'm happy to work, nearby where they play, and I usually have headphones in, but you can kind of hear the shenanigans going on, and
mhm.
like you just can't swing a cat for hitting a gifted person in that group. Like they're all quirky, intelligent, creative, different ages, the diversity, and it's just kind of like, this is diversity in all its beauty, and
Mhm,
it's really lovely. And what it strikes me is everyone gets something different out of it because
mm.
there's so much going on at Dungeons and Dragons. And if you ask my child, they're like, love the math involved in
Mhm.
all of the dice, and the moments in the game where you're battling. It's kind of like, yeah, I'm in it for the battles,
Right.
but some of them are in it for the lovely story.
Mhm.
Some of them are in it for the building characters.
Right.
Some love all the little figurine things.
Mhm.
So, and I had read some research around Dungeons and Dragons just being, and like there's a lot online about how great D&D is, and this particular one was talking about its multidisciplinary nature. Like there's so much going on within a game. And so how do you facilitate your games?
I want to touch upon one of the things you said quickly, which I think is
Yeah,
so
yeah,
important.
please do.
And it's really easy to gloss over, but one of the things that our students love about D&D is that there's the opportunity for them to do two things in the character field, right? One is create an avatar, which might
Mhm.
have traits that they fantasize about or wish they might have, or might even create just comically or creatively. But the other is, as you talk about with the rules, it's understanding that they have certain responsibilities. I'm the healer. Like, I have a
Mhm.
role to play, and that for students who struggle to socialize, that's very concrete. My
Yep,
job is to help others. It
yep,
feels good, and there might be someone who's like, "I'm the bomb guy," and then there's
yeah.
always gonna be someone who's like, I do demolitions and, but
Mm.
we our students get this, like, they get this clarity and this confidence that comes around, the role and understanding the role and being able to fulfill it and play it and however quirky it may be. Um, so I think that's really important, and I think a lot
Yeah.
of students get a lot of comfort where they might not have that comfort in their own skin, they might have it in their character and their avatar.
Yeah, and on that note, like, for example, our child, quite the risk-averse child, started off being this sort of, what's it called? Like a stealth I've lost the word. What's an archer, but from a distance.
Like a longbow. Um,
Yeah, like a
I know what you mean.
you know what I mean? You see
Yeah,
them on TV, and it's always like that one guy with the big gun, and they're like 10 kilometers away because 'cause they're so
yeah,
good. I've lost the word.
like a
Anyway,
sniper,
yes,
but
thank you. Yes,
yeah.
like a sniper, but with a bow.
Mhm,
And, keeping it real on the podcast, can't think of words. So they were this sniper, and they would get involved in the battle from, like, such a good character, they could be,
mhm,
like, 5 Ks away and still hit the target
mhm.
because, it's all about numbers. And that's how they started off. And then not so long ago, it turned up to a game with a new character as a fighter who
Mhm,
which is, as you can imagine, is very much in the middle of the battle. And it
mhm.
was really interesting that all the players kind of went, "Oh, new character. Ooh, fighter.
Yeah,
Wow." Like, really acknowledged that shift in risk and playing.
right?
And it was just this beautiful moment of, I'm going to be I'm ready to be brave. I'm ready to be in amongst it and take more risk,
Mhm.
and that evolution. And what was so beautiful about that was the fellow players acknowledging and realizing that shift for that person and kind of celebrating that with them. It was a really beautiful thing.
It's so important, and as you said, there are all these different, you could be like a cleric or like a
Yeah.
warlock. There's so many different sort of casts or character categories, and again, it gives our students a sense of expression, and as you're saying, like the community too. Like when you change a character, it affects the community, and then they react strongly to it. Our class, our D&D campaign is in 30 minutes, and I just when you were talking, Sophia, it made me think. I got an email from a mom a couple weeks back. We were just switching into the new semester. This is our fall semester too, and she sent me this really mixed email where she had some things that were going on that were really challenging for her. Her kiddo had a really difficult weekend because something happened in school. But she said, my son said the greatest thing of all today. He said, I want to switch sections because my friends are in the other section. And she said, I've never heard him say the friends word before. And it brought her to tears, and it almost brought me to tears. I mean,
I could
ju-
cry. That's just so
yeah, just I
beautiful.
have goosebumps just telling you about it. And there's just something where I'm like, yep, we're doing the right thing. We're doing the right thing here. We're doing something special here. Because when
Yeah.
you hear that, I do. I have full body goosebumps right now telling you.
Yeah.
Just that idea that like someone found something that they belong to, that they want to keep coming back to week in and week out, and that when the students move, they're going to go with them because that's more important than whatever else it may be.
It is such a beautiful thing. And compose myself. Like, that is so beautiful because it's so hard to find those places that our kids can just feel like they're making that connection. And, like, let's face it, that can keep you going through the week
Mhm,
if you're having a rough time at school,
mhm,
knowing that Thursday night is game night and I get to
mhm.
hang out with my buddies. We all need those little sanctuaries in life. And oh, that's so beautiful. And it's certainly something you see. And what I love about kind of being on the periphery and having the privilege to kind of witness the game in action is how some, and everyone's different, but some individuals get very, love to act out the characters. And so they will kind of play the game in character,
Mhm.
which allows for immense humor as they're, this, large sort of older teenagers pretending to be a small elf, or
Yeah.
just whatever it might be, and as they interpret and present, those quirks of their character, uh, there's so many different things that it offers people in the game. And so, yeah, a really beautiful creative thing. The other thing I referred to earlier was we would play a stripped down version as a family. And so D&D is like this hugely complex thing. There's no kind of hiding that, which is what, no doubt people find really satisfying. So, but as a family, we would just kind of, my husband would be the dungeon master, and he'd come up with a little story that would only take like half an hour to kind of
Mhm.
work through. We would all have a sort of stripped back character, and one of my children were an enchanted unicorn, and you could be whatever you want to be, like free reign on creativity. But what was really interesting about that, and I think where our gifted kids can really shine in this, is we were trying to solve this problem. And as an adult, not saying that we're not creative, but with our lived experience, we're probably more inclined to come up with the obvious,
Mhm.
solution to a problem. And that's what we were kind of doing as adults. And my brother was visiting, and he was playing as well. And one of my youngest kids just came up with this incredibly creative solution to this problem. And we all just kind of went, wow,
Yeah.
and kind of looked at this kid like, that's awesome. Where did that come from? And so it's this wonderful opportunity for everyone to shine with their creativity and problem solving and really show who they are, because as a very creative game, there's doesn't have to be those limits that we normally have. So just a great opportunity to put those strengths that we have as neurodivergent people, you know, to the test
Yeah.
and be creative in so many ways. So
It's so important, and especially just, from like a neurological standpoint, you're getting all these, neurons to fire, right? You're creating these pathways which might not be tapped into in like a top-down school, right? Where it's like rote memorization, and we're not always tapping into these elements. And when we think about, like, at least here in the United States, I live in Los Angeles. Like, when I look at people who are wildly successful around me, it's quirky, creative writers, actors, and it's or here, like, the economy of the United States is largely driven by entrepreneurs, right? Small businesses. And what is entrepreneurship but finding a small problem or a big problem
mhm,
and coming up
mhm.
with a creative solution. So, the kind of thinking that your kiddo is modeling is like exactly what we want to be encouraging our students to do. And yeah, games like Dungeons and Dragons and so many others do that. Before we had D&D, we had a program that one of my we call all of our teachers like our mentors. One of our mentors, Greg, had created a course called Mathlandia, which was like a quest-based math game, and it was really cool. And students who loved math loved it. Like, we gave a student an award because he never missed one in 2 years. Like, he signed up for every. And we had a student in
Beautiful.
Switzerland. He would take the class at 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. in Switzerland. And we're based out of California. So, I mean, you do the math, and he's I think he's like 12 when he started with us. So, like, it was like this really tight cohort, but it was because it had the word math in it. It excited some, and
Yeah.
alienated others. But there's
Yeah.
something about Dungeons and Dragons, like you said, that allows everyone to come in from different perspectives. You can be the math person. You can be the creative storyteller. You can be anyone on the spectrum of characters, of roles, of rules, and come in at in a way that like excites you and allows you to like kind of add value to the team and to the quest and so forth. I
Yeah,
think that's so important.
absolutely. Yeah, it's so true. And so anyone listening who has never played Dungeons and Dragons before, a little bit about the game. So as we've said, it's a role-playing game, which means you literally roll dice for things to happen. So an example of that might be, here's a big troll. we've all got to work together to defeat the troll. Roll a dice. And you might roll a dice for, and I'm going to get the terminology wrong, but to see what you can see. What was that called? That's actually got a name. I'm doing a very bad job of this, but
Yeah,
then you
better than
might
I
then,
would. You're doing a better job
okay.
than I would.
So you might roll it to see how much you can see of what's going on. If you get a high score, then you can see a lot of what's going on. And if you get a low score, they're just kind of like, yeah, it's pitch black. You can't see anything, you know? So there are these mechanisms that impact the game. And then you might roll again to see whether or not you hit the troll with your sword or arrow. And the higher the number, you know, you've got to get over a certain point to do damage and that kind of thing. So there's lots of dice rolling. You'll see the dice. They're like all different shapes and sizes, and you roll different ones for different things. And so that can be very appealing to people. You all create, as we've talked about, a character. And the character has different traits, and there's numbers associated with all these traits that will determine, you know, if you're a fighter, for example, how strong you are, or if you're a magical person, how magical you are, that kind of thing. And then you have someone that we've referred to, the dungeon master, or I think sometime also the game master, perhaps a DM or a GM. And that's the person who is like in charge of the adventure. So they've done their homework, they've prepared this sort of storyline and what the quest is, and they're like the narrator in a movie, and you know, they kind of narrate the way through this quest, and they're like, oh, and you turn the corner and there's a dragon, and now you've got to fight. Oh, actually, is it a friendly dragon or a bad, you know? So they kind of narrate the quest and come up with this storyline, and that in itself is this amazing opportunity for growth, because when you start the game, you know, you're going to be one of the characters in the team, but over time you can share having a go at being the dungeon master and coming up with this story yourself, which is a whole kind of other set of skills and requires a lot of confidence to do that kind of role. And yeah, what I love about it is how different people will play their characters differently, and sometimes quite literally be very dramatic, and other times just kind of like, oh, I'm rolling the dice. But it's the laughter and the, you know, that bonding that happens while you play and solving this problem together, that's really beautiful. And like you said, this amazing opportunity to make friends, like, you know. And if you're looking as a parent for places to play, so you can play online, and you obviously do it online with your students, and I'll get you to tell us a little bit about that. But you can also do it in person, like we do it in person at the local library, but you know, people meet in different places. And it really is just designed for gifted community, because like our group is all sorts of ages. My child was actually the youngest there by far, and there were teenagers of various ages, and then there were like adults, couple in their, look like they're in their 20s, a couple in their 30s, like proper range of people. But it's just the most inclusive, welcoming, supportive bunch of folk, all there over this common interest, and they love it, you know. And I went and played once, and I was kind of like, oh my God, deer in a headlight. Like it was, I'm like, okay. And I'm, you know, I'm not great. Yeah, like my kids also have certain social challenges. And I was just kind of like, this is, as an introvert. Anyway, everyone's so gracious, and I'm kind of like, how do I do the math on the cat? And they're like, oh, someone needs a character, and everyone helps, and just so beautiful. So yeah, tell
It's
us a
an
little
amazing
bit.
community. Yeah, it is so
Yeah.
special. I totally agree, and it can be wildly intimidating from the outside when you see like oh, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons 20 years or 10 years or 5, and you're thinking like, this kid's only like 15, he's been playing 7 years. Like that's a long time. Uh,
Yeah.
and it can be a bit intimidating. And one of the things that my dungeon master, Jason, our mentor in D&D's done, we have two groups. We have our intermediate returners, and then we have our newbies. And for the newbies, he's created his own system, which is kind of like a quick character one sheet.
Yeah.
So kind of going beyond like the dense book, like the D&D
Mm.
Beyond book and the character
Yeah.
creation sites, which are fantastic for students who
Mm.
want them.
Yeah.
And we almost had a coup on the first day because our returner class, we're like, all right, we're gonna put the book aside and we're gonna do the one sheets, but we'll put it to a vote. And everyone's like, no, we want the book. And we're like, okay, so right,
I'm ready for the
returner, like
book.
let's put it to a vote. The returner class was really adamant, like we vehemently want the book, so you guys got it. For our newbies, we're like, okay, listen, this is a big world. There's going to be more
Yeah.
complexity that comes later. For now, our goal is just to get you in. And so
Yeah.
he's created these. It doesn't have every character role, but it's like the three archetypes that are most common, or four or five, or I can't remember.
Yeah.
And it's just a really quick kind of plug-in worksheet, and it gets them started
Yeah.
early. That way they can kind of roll their sleeves up, their
Oh,
wizard
yeah.
sleeves, and
Yeah.
and start playing, as early as possible, and then just learn while doing.
Yeah.
And I
Which
think
is
it's one of those.
excellent approach because I have seen my child spend like an hour creating a character. This is not a light-hearted,
Oh, it's
endeavor
serious
doing it
business.
with the
Yeah,
book. So yeah,
right.
it's great to get that plug and play initially just to kind of get a feel for it. But I can appreciate that they're after the big experience once I've done it for a while. That's so
Right, exactly, and
beautiful.
then they crave the complexity, right? They don't want
Yeah.
the quick and dirty. They want the complexity, and they want the excitement. And one of the things that's so cool too is that, these students, like I'm thinking of the class that runs today, it's 4 students from 4 different time zones.
Yeah.
We have, different places in the well, 3 different time zones, sorry. All over the United States, and we've had students join from Canada, and it's just so cool because some of them are homeschooled, some of them are in public school, some are in private, but most of them are missing that one thing, which is just that community. They may
Yeah.
not have a space where there is like what you have sounds amazing, like a D&D at
Mm.
your local library. Like what a dream! Like
Yeah.
it's like gold in your backyard.
Yeah.
Uh,
So lucky.
Not everyone has that, so
Mm.
it's just been kind of our vision to create a space where students can tap into that. And our
Mhm.
games are like an hour and a half, and they build over 6 to 8 weeks. So it's an
Mhm.
ongoing quest. Like, as you said, like they develop the characters and then they start to go on the quest. And whenever the clock runs up, they leave it there and they make notes,
Yeah.
and then we pick up the next week. And so kind of
Yeah.
starts with like a review of what happened and where did we leave off in the action. And it's one of those things
Yeah.
like the kids don't forget. They're not like, where
Yeah.
were we? It's like, okay, those skeletons were rappelling down and we had to figure out how we could cross the drawbridge before the moat filled.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like that's the one thing where they're not like, "Hey, son, what'd you learn at school today?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't know." It's like we are facing some serious stuff right here. Like,
Yeah, that's right.
it's so exciting, and it's yeah, it's just awesome.
Yeah, and that sounds really great, and, like, I bet that hour and a half goes quickly. My child meets up, and they're there for, like, 4 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, like and, uh, and they don't always seem to get very far, but they obviously enjoy it along the way. So that just sounds beautiful, and what a great opportunity, and, like, for anyone out there who can't find it in their backyard, like, we have been incredibly fortunate to. It's great to have those connections online and then meeting people from all over different places, like, that in itself is really beautiful, and what great opportunities to make friendships there.
Eh, I
So
have a Can I tell you a 30-second
yeah.
story?
Oh,
This is
please,
this
please do.
isn't from D&D, but this is something that just popped up when you said
Yeah,
backyard. But I had a student, I can't say their names obviously, but I had a
yeah,
student in a certain part of the country who was in some of our courses, and this summer was at a park and recognized another student from taking our courses,
yeah,
ran up to them and was like, "Are you?" And the student's like, "Are you?" And they like are now friends. Their moms talk like, and they were both just in. They lived in the same city. They were in Young Scholars Academy summer camp, which was the
yeah,
the Manflandia one, the one that came before Dungeons and
yeah,
Dragons. And now they hang out all the time, and it's like this really cool story of these two students who were like together virtually and then met in real life
Yeah.
coincidentally.
Yeah.
Like, you
That's
never know, like,
beautiful.
who's in your backyard, or
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It can be a great way of finding people and connecting. And, do you know, like, I often feel very grateful for Zoom, and how easy it is these days and what a given it is to talk to people as we are from
Mhm.
all over the world, US, Australia. It's like, yeah, that's cool. Let's catch up. And it's such a beautiful thing, and very, uh, very amenable to doing things like D&D and stuff like that. So yeah, that's really awesome. Uh, Thank you so much for very impromptuly taking the time to chat with us about D&D. I really appreciate it for GTN Awareness Week this week.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome, and I'm looking forward to the next time I can come on and chat with you more.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to our next chat, and we're going to hear a bit more about Young Scholars Academy as well. But in the meantime, let people know, how can folk find you and get in touch?
Yeah, I think the easiest way, rather than giving you a bunch of information, if you just look us up, youngscholarsacademy.org, you
Mhm.
can contact me, you can get in touch with me, and I take it from there. So just youngscholarsacademy.org.
Awesome. And so you provide, obviously, different ways of getting together online. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that you do other than D&D.
So we have, usually at any time, we have like 15 to 20 different course offerings. So that could be like several sections of the same courses, but we
Mhm.
have programs that range from, yeah, of course, D&D speech and debate. We have ecology, climate change courses. We do advanced placement courses as well for students who we really know have this like high aptitude and like gifted abilities, but sometimes maybe struggle with the production. So we kind of found
Mhm.
like a creative program to help them get like college credit at a younger age. So we have like psychology, U.S. history, U.S. government, and then we have a myriad of other things from entrepreneur classes. Trying to think of what we have right now. Goodness. We have, Young and Thriving, which is an executive function course where it's like strength-based programs that students like build their own executive function systems for like task managing and note taking.
I feel
And
like I
we
need that.
have a big thing too is the gap between high school and like university. So we
Mm.
created programs called Adulting and Thriving. It's like a year-long interest exploration and executive function course where students kind of delve, instead of saying like, what am I going to do next year? Like, what am I like called to do? What am I compelled to do? And then they create a plan. And then we have a college version, which is like college companions, where we're checking in on them every other week or so, and they're just making sure they're getting the support that they need, and doing like fun scavenger hunts, like, can you find a student accommodations office, like get 5 leaflets from social events that you've checked out, or things like that. So there's so much different stuff that we do, I can't even think of it all right now.
That's all right. You
But
did a
we
great job for on the spot,
uh,
and we'll hear more about that next time we catch up. Uh,
absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Hugely appreciate, like I said, the last minute invite to talk about D&D, and finally, catching up on take 2 of Sophia getting up in the morning. Thank you so much, Sam. I
We
look
did it.
forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Sophie. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.